Hi, Corey Copeland calling in from District 4. Apologies if you hear a helicopter. I think they're the official bird of our district. I think the proposal before the council has some serious policy problems, and releasing this with so little public input at the last minute is really just awful from a process perspective. And I get that it's a response to like the worst policy proposal I've ever seriously seen considered in this city, where we bankrupt ourselves making internment camps. And to be honest, some of us, I think we're just sitting here wondering, if I want something done, should I do what Daniel did? I could just like write some god awful city killer policy and then find a few hundred friends and confuse people to sign a sheet. And then I get to like blackmail the city council. I think we need to be honest that this is just all completely unacceptable. That said, I will give some actual policy feedback, even though I know that's like make-believe land, because apparently Daniel Conway, Sacramento's worst citizen policy writer, gets veto power over city policy now. But here are 3 criticisms I had of the way that this policy is designed. First, I think it's structured in a way where a failure is success from the city's perspective. The manager, based on his analysis, basically said that he's deeply worried about encumbering obligations for the city. And so the best way to prevent that would be to make sure that the sites are underutilized. So that would mean making them distant or poor quality. And so that kind of worries me. Second is also, I think it features a green light for police to perform sweeps. Again, I think so. You know, like the mayor, I had no clue because of, and the city attorney didn't really clarify what does manage them mean, if not seize people's property and arrest them. And then lastly, I think a $5 million budget is just completely inadequate. The only way I can imagine housing thousands of people on a budget like that is to do so in a completely inhumane way. So we're all kind of like characters in a Samuel Beckett novel where we're forever waiting on the county who never comes. And so without funding identified or even locations, this entire proposal seems extremely likely to fail. So, you know, I encourage everyone to take time to seriously reconsider this proposal in a sane way instead of through this weird blackmail ballot process.
So I find it very concerning that the mayor and the city council are allowing Mr. Conway to bully them into a rush decision on a flawed initiative. I think that is really bad precedent. Mr. Conway took offense to the analogy to having a gun held to our heads. But, you know, the analogy that comes to front for me is Mr. Putin with a nuclear option to bankrupt the city if he doesn't get what he wants. If this initiative gets on the ballot, a lot of money will be spent on both sides to support it and to fight it. More money will be spent on lawsuits trying to defend them. All of that money could be spent on constructive solutions to homelessness if this isn't rushed forward. Nothing in this initiative focuses on building new houses. All the money is going to temporary shelters. So it's not going to solve homelessness. It's not going to move the solution forward. It's just going to spend money. Instead of this initiative, let's have the city council create an initiative to have the city and the county create a commission with the express assignment of within a year coming up with a plan to end homelessness in the next 5 years. Let's really look at this comprehensively. Let's do it in a public, transparent way to come up with a real solution to the problem. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This is Joe Smith with Loaves and Fishes. And just for a moment, take a look at this from an angle that I've been looking at this and lamenting over all day. This ordinance wants to single out a group of people by virtue of the fact that they are poor and don't have a home. The ordinance wants to tell them that the way they've been surviving is no longer legal, that they have 14 days to accept a spot in a government-sanctioned encampment, and all they can basically take with them is what they can carry, or they're going to be criminalized in 12100.040. They'll be charged with a misdemeanor. Again, this is terrifying. Think this through again. You're taking a poor person, telling them that the way they're surviving doesn't matter. They have 14 days to accept a spot in a government camp, or they're going to be arrested. Absolutely terrifying. Secondly, we've all watched the back and forth with the county, and unless the county is written on this ordinance somewhere, it's my fear and many others I've talked to that this back and forth is going to continue. The folks that really need the services that the county has aren't going to get them because of this incessant back and forth between the county and the city. Lastly, and I've thought this through. There's one of the things you've all run into is NIMBYism, where people don't want encampments near them. I think one of the bright spots in all this is the city manager will have the authority to place a site where it's available to be placed, thereby taking away the businesses and the neighborhood associations' objections and even council members from blocking it. I mean, if the city manager says it's legal and it's legit, the camp can go there. Not quite sure how the business community and the neighborhood's going to feel about that, but I do think that's a bright spot in all this, is NIMBYism kind of gets pushed to the side where it should have been all along. Thank you.
Carly Brannon, if you'll unmute.
Yeah, I think so. Hey, y'all, this is actually Nikki. We're just together, and I'm driving, so I'm on her phone, but Nikki Jones. And yeah, I can't believe that I'm hearing this tonight so quickly. How, why can a powerful lobbyist get an emergency meeting, but the emergency that people face night to night can't get action for years and years? Why is that? This process, people have already said it in so many more eloquent words than I can, but the process is shameful, and y'all should stop, put the brakes, reconsider, check yourselves, check your influences, check your motivations. This is an enforcement ordinance through and through. That's its purpose. How do we get to the place of enforcement? Its 4-point step is not how do we get people to housing, it's how do we get to the place of enforcement. If we don't have actual sustainable solutions that people who live outside are engaged in the process of creating, you will not succeed, and you will only continue the status quo of criminalization, displacement, trauma, distrust. You're going to continue cycles of neglect and abandonment and re-traumatize people who've already been through so much. So this, like someone said, this is a non-starter. I can't believe y'all. I have to say, I am shocked, which is weird because I'm like, yeah, they're all, it's crooked as fuck. We all know it's always been whatever the business district wants. But to hear it so blatantly, to watch you pull an emergency meeting when it's been an emergency for so long, when people have suffered so much. And the emergency for you isn't even that people are suffering, it's that people can see it. Y'all need to check yourselves and stop.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Will you make your final comment, please?
I hope you can hear me. And Rick Jennings, I appreciate
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. This is Nikki Pascal, a resident of Midtown. It's really frustrating for me as a voter to hear elected officials saying the city needs this initiative as a cudgel to force action on homelessness when it's your job to lead on this issue. There's no reason it had to come to this situation that the mayor referred to as being, quote, over a barrel. And if you move this forward, you're just encouraging other special interests with horrible policies to leverage you in the way that is being done tonight. This idea that you have to have a legal mandate to address homelessness is deeply flawed. The city does all kinds of things that it's not legally required to do. You weren't legally required to build Golden 1, but you did it anyway. And on the substance of this initiative, if it was actually written to help create shelter and housing, then there would be funding attached. But there's nothing in this initiative that changes the fact that the city can't even fund its current shelter space and in its budget, as the city manager admitted in the agenda item. It's clear to me that the real intent of this initiative is to make camping illegal, even though no credible expert believes that service resistance is the fundamental problem here. In fact, the state's foremost expert, Dr. Kushel at UCSF, has done extensive research demonstrating that even those unsheltered folks with the highest level of impairment want housing and can be housed when the services offered match their needs. Lastly, but maybe most importantly, I want to know how many unsheltered people were consulted in the design of this proposal. You are moving forward a policy that affects at least 10,000 unsheltered people, the majority of whom are people of color. We can't just pay lip service to equity and then ignore the voices of the people this will affect, people that have been failed by structural racism and by allowing NIMBYs to block affordable housing. So instead of taking away their rights, let's hear what they actually have to say. Thank you.
Hi. So yeah, first off, this meeting should not be happening. Unlike the members of the business community and unelected officials who orchestrated this shady process, attending this meeting was incredibly difficult to plan on short notice for those of us not in the know. It's absolutely unacceptable process and speaks volumes to who holds power in this city. And yeah, this was the bait and switch that we were all waiting for. The concerns that were voiced about the original plan are realized by this so-called compromise, which clearly states that encampments are prohibited in a very explicit way. It's not an imperfection, as the mayor called it. It is a craven and appalling attempt to circumvent Martin v. Boise, democratic process, and basic human rights. And all of this hand-wringing about the cost is embarrassing. Of course, it's expensive to continue upholding the pointless, wasteful, and cruel homeless industrial complex. It costs a whole lot more than just simply providing long-term housing options and services. You're investing all of this money into so-called bridges, but what are they bridges to? They're bridges to nothing. We keep hearing about San Antonio's Haven of Hope model. Are we hearing about it from unhoused folks, advocates, service providers? No, we're hearing it from business owners and those who have historically never acted in the interest of the most marginalized Sacramentans. It's well documented that Haven for Hope is a glorified internment camp, and anyone who's genuinely interested in the experiences of its current and former residents could easily find that info, and I strongly encourage all of you to look into that. And Sean, you're my council person, and you are wrong that some people need other services before they get housing. That is a dangerous lie. But back to process, these are not the behaviors of people who know they're doing the right thing. And those of you endorsing this without input from the most knowledgeable and the most impacted, even as you performatively critique the tactics used by the proponents of getting it shoved through, you are showing your allegiance, and we see you. Thank you.
Yes, hi, thanks. Do not fast track this. This measure is punitive, and I know the mayor has a tendency towards punitive measures when addressing people with trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma resulting in their homelessness. I do support the amendments of Councilmember Vang and Valenzuela. However, if the city and the county are doing their jobs and there is no reason why these folks shouldn't be housed, the reality is the failing is your own. There is no reason why they should be penalized. Add to that the only way to get the numbers that this measure is talking about and the time frame it's talking about would necessitate creating large encampments on some of the only city-owned land that I know that is large enough, namely the 100 acres in District 8. And that's untenable. This issue affects every neighborhood across the city, and there is no reason why any one or two districts should shoulder the entire responsibility themselves. I'm tired of you taking advantage of poor and marginalized communities so that rich communities can retain their comfort. This is literally what we are trying to get away from. We decry redlining, and yet you continue to push for policies that disproportionately negatively impact those same communities. The fact is that this has been tried in small measure, and Chico got slapped down when they tried to categorize something as shelter that wasn't. Stick to your comprehensive siting plan. Insist the council members who barely did enough to get a D on the assignment actually follow through with the promises of the siting plan, namely actual housing. I also heard no onus on the city as far as the robustness of the offer from the city. I can easily see someone offered insufficient housing for an insufficient time period in inhumane conditions, and them refusing such treatment is then criminalized. Boise defined behavior as cruel and unusual punishment. Stop trying to skirt that and get as close to cruel and unusual as legally allowable. That doesn't make you a great city. It doesn't even make you a good city. It makes you contemptible. I'd also like to know how many of the e-comments support and oppose this. And I'd like to ask that that be read prior to the vote of future items so that those constituents can't just be ignored. Thank you.